Hello and welcome to the Rotoworld Baseball Show. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined as always by my co-host, Scott Pianowski, to talk baseball on this wonderful Wednesday afternoon. Scott, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Middle of June. Waiting for the weather warm-up, offense warm-up. It hasn't happened yet, but we're going to try to figure that out today.
We are. Yeah, we are. We're going to talk about why home runs aren't home running today. We're going to look at some data that was given to us by the very friendly Jason Collette, who has been collecting some data on fly ball distances, exit velocities, etc., trying to figure out maybe why the home run landscape and the run landscape in general in baseball is down a little bit this year. So we'll be doing that. We'll go over some news and notes, and then at the very end of the show, Scott and I are going to rank some streamers for you, just looking at some of the top streamers for the weekend. I'll include Thursday in that. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're not going to do a lot of detailed analysis on that. It's going to be like, here are kind of the top guys. Where would you go? And hopefully that will give you all some insight if you are going to be streaming some starting pitchers this weekend. We got to start with the biggest news of the last, 48 hours, I guess, which is JT Realmuto undergoing knee surgery. Apparently, Phillies beat writers said the decision was made a week ago, which would have been lovely for many of us to know a week ago when the decision was made, that it was going to happen. Obviously, getting your post-fab news that your catcher is going to be out with knee surgery is not ideal. The Phillies have not yet given a timeline. Obviously, once the surgery is completed, they'll probably have a better understanding. The rough timeline for this type of meniscus surgery is 4 to 6 weeks. I believe it was Johan Rojas had this surgery last year. It was a Phillies center fielder. I'll need to double check. But it was, and that took 6 weeks. It was Christian Pache, different outfielder. Christian Pache had the same surgery and missed 6 weeks last year. JT Realmuto is older and a catcher, so you have to believe kind of 6 weeks is what we're looking at, with the potential to be more if the Phillies are still in a pretty good spot for the playoffs and they don't want to rush him back. If we're looking at 6 to 8 weeks here, Scott, you're holding him in leagues without an IL spot?
I probably not. It depends on size of your league, of course, and how many catchers you start, what's on the waiver wire. I mean, in some leagues, some of the more shallow leagues, Tyler Stevenson's available in 2/3 of Yahoo leagues, so that might be a nice pivot. Or Connor Wong or Shea Langoliers, at least has some power. He doesn't have a batting average. I was wondering, Realmuto was barely over a league average offensive player last year, and obviously he's caught so many games. He's been in an era where a lot of teams want to rotate catching and give them a lot of days off. He's always played heavy workloads, and you just wonder if this is the attrition is added up. He's like a running back in the NFL. At some point, they just get too many carries and their effectiveness goes down. And this year, his OPS plus is 105, just over a league average player. It's basically the level of player he was last year. I was doing my shuffle up for the catchers a few days ago before the news, right? Maybe an hour or two before the news on Realmuto dropped. And I was dropping him a tier anyway. Mm-hmm. He was no longer in that, the 3 or 4 catchers that you elbow your way to the top to get, guys like Contreras and Will Smith and guys like that. And I'm afraid I don't want to be an injury optimist on this. And the Phillies also, best record in baseball, that is polished it off the Red Sox last night. They're going to be in a position where they just want him healthy for October. So I think when he comes back, it's going to be a lot of load management. They're not going to want to overtax him. And my fantasy expectations would be extremely muted for the rest of the season.
Yeah, 261 on the year with 7 home runs, just 1 stolen base. That was part of the value with Realmuto, right? Was he was going to run more than other catchers over the last month. And granted, like, the most recent stats will obviously be impacted by this knee issue, which we understand he's been playing through for a while. The 611th ranked player in Yahoo standard 5x5 over the last month. That's only 17 games. Again, we understand the injury is factored into that. But what your point was is, like, if you've been just blindly putting him in your lineup over the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, you're not really getting a lot of production anyway. And there were probably guys on the wire who would have given you more production, but you're not going to drop JT Realmuto for Connor Wong when Realmuto is playing it in the lineup. If you are in a situation right now, I can understand moving on from Realmuto. I will say I have a little bit of like I'm shocked. I'm wary of pulling the trigger because I had both Wilson Contreras and Francisco Alvarez in NFBC format leagues where I dropped them when I thought they were going to be out for a long time. Alvarez came back quicker than I expected. I'm a little bit like hesitant to pull the trigger because I've been playing the catcher roulette game in those leagues and it hasn't been good. And I have scooped up Wilson Contreras in some of those leagues again to just stash on my bench. Because if I wasn't able to get like, Patrick Bailey's been good for me, guys like that. There's not a lot out there. I understand the hesitation and I understand if people want to wait until the surgery is completed and we get a real firm timeline for him. But I'm not optimistic right now. It's going to be less than a month.
The strategy is so bifurcated because one catcher and two catcher formats are just completely different worlds,
Yes.
right? And that's why one catcher, you can kind of relax, right? It's like, oh, okay, Patrick Bailey, only 18% rostered in Yahoo League. So you could probably pivot to him right now and cut Realmuto in a one catcher league. But as you mentioned, NFBC, 12-team or 15-teamer league where you're playing two catchers. Think about that. 15 teams, two catchers. That's 30 catchers you have to play if you don't want to carry one on the bench. We always think, running backs and starting pitchers comp, fantasy football, fantasy baseball. Catchers are the tight ends of fantasy baseball, where there's always somebody who wants to beat the tight end market and take Travis Kelce in the first or second round. Maybe this year it'll be Samuel Porter in the second round. And there's always been somebody who's been like, okay, I'm going to get the best catcher. And for many years, Realmuto was unquestionably that guy. And a lot of it is volume. When I did those rankings, those catchers, every catcher who had 200 plate appearances was essentially a catcher one.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're getting DH time. Contreras doesn't want to come out of the game, right? They tried to give him a day off like 10 days ago. He said, no, I'll play. Why wouldn't I play? Right. I want to keep playing, right? Sometimes the manager or the organization needs to be the adult in the room. But this is a case where I think in one catcher leagues, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. Realmuto wasn't playing that great anyway, obviously playing through an injury the last few weeks. In two catcher leagues, you're probably looking at breadcrumbs and it's not going to be fun.
Yes, not fun at all. Other big news in baseball was the debut of I wrote Drew Lock on the this is the football side of me. I wrote Drew Lock.
Well, the game was in Seattle, so I guess
it was not the debut of Drew Lock.
No.
It was the debut of Drew Thorpe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you had a chance to watch that debut.
I did.
My Mixing It Up article when I look at pitch mixes came out this morning, and I included Lock. It was a rookie only article, so it had Hurston, Waldrop, and Povich and Lock, and so I Thorpe. Oh my god, I keep saying Lock. I'm not even a Drew Lock fan. I don't understand what's happening.
Swaggy Drew.
So I encourage everybody to check that out. But I'm curious what your thoughts were on Thorpe's debut. Yesterday.
Yeah, nice compact delivery. He's got that great dreamy changeup, which Pitcher Ninja was sending out some video on that. It's going to be the thing with him is he's never going to make the radar gun pop, right? Was he top out around 93, 94, something like that?
He maxed at 93 last night, sat around 91.
Okay. So you need the secondary pitches to be good. You need the makeup to be good. I think and I'm not far from a pitching coach. I'm not a Maddox. I'm not a Leo Mazzone. I'm not a Dave Wallace, but that delivery looks so repeatable to me. Mm-hmm. I feel like he could easily be. I think of what Mike Soroka was before he got hurt. I think that might be the ceiling for, I want to call him Drew Thorpe.
Yeah, I really liked watching him pitch, as a baseball fan. I love his presence on the mound. I love the way that he just kind of attacks the strike zone. There were some issues with command. That is pretty much stock standard for MLB debuts. We talk about it all the time. The way that guys are amped. I think he will become a better real life pitcher than fantasy pitcher because I don't see a ton of strikeout upside in a profile that leads with a changeup that is a really good changeup that mirrors well with the fastball, that because of his release point where he really hides the ball well in his mechanics, where the changeup almost appears from behind his head when he throws it, and then it looks like the fastball for a little bit and then darts away, and you're kind of like, okay, that is tough for hitters to pick up on. It is going to, I think, based on a lot of the stuff plus grades we've seen, the pitch is going to play better than it grades because of all of those other elements. It is a very good changeup. I kind of appreciated the cutter last night. He doesn't throw it a lot, but I liked the cutter, but he only throws the cutter to lefties. So basically his two best pitches in my eyes are pitches that are going to do better to lefties than to righties. I see him being a guy who like maybe goes a lot of starts where he's like 6 innings, 2 runs allowed, 4 or 5 strikeouts, and not a lot of walks and not a lot of wins because he plays on the White Sox. And so in a deeper format, that has some value because I think he's going to be relatively stable for your ratios based on just what I saw in the debut. But in shallower formats, I think that's tougher to roster because you're not getting wins or strikeouts, and that's more of a streamer type for me.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're describing Cal Quantrill at his best, who by the way, has been really good this year. If you can pitch Cal Quantrill outside of Colorado, that's actually been worthwhile.
Nick Pollock mentioned Michael Wacha when talking about Drew Thorpe.
I can see that. Okay.
And to me, that makes some sense. Michael Wacha is another guy who leans on the changeup and thrived over the last few years by leaning on the changeup even more, but thrived in the sense that like in a 15-team league, you're really happy to have Michael Wacha. In a 12-team league, you are shuffling him on and off your roster depending on schedule.
Right. And the schedule is not bad. He has Arizona on the road this weekend. And then next week, it looks like he's lining up with Detroit, which has been a disappointing offense. And he's going up against Kenta Maeda, who's not pitched well. So you would think he'd have a decent chance of getting a win. I may even go to that game in Detroit.
Nice.
And you mentioned the cutter, and we talked about the changeup a lot. The good thing about those pitches is that he already has a path to winning the platoon split, right? That's a big thing with right-handed pitchers. How do they get left-handers out? And we know the changeup is often a reliance pitch for that. And you mentioned he's throwing the cutters a lot to lefties. So how well he does, I know it's a right-handed world, but you can't get tattooed by lefties. And a lot of right-handed pitchers struggle with that. At least Thorpe already has a game plan for managing the platoon deficiency.
Yeah. Other big news today. I say big news. I guess it wasn't really big news. But Cavan Biggio was traded.
Any trade is big news.
Any trade is big news. Sure. Any trade that also involves the Dodgers, because the Dodgers have reached that status where people are like, "Ooh, the Dodgers picked up Cavan Biggio. They must know something that we don't." But Cavan Biggio was traded to the Dodgers for minor league reliever Braden Fisher. The corresponding move that allows the Dodgers to put Biggio on the active roster is that Miguel Vargas was sent back down to AAA. Is there a takeaway for you in this deal for Biggio, or is the biggest noise in this deal, or the biggest news in this deal, that Miguel Vargas is not really getting an opportunity?
It's just hard for me to see Biggio playing full time. He just looks like another left-handed hitter who may play part of the time. At least he has some defensive flexibility. Not that he's a great defender, but you can put him a couple different places. I'm curious to see if the Dodgers eventually trade for a shortstop. Mookie has been a below average shortstop this year. As much as we love Mookie Betts, he's one of the MVP favorites. Although he's calmed down, his production has really slowed down after that unbelievably torrid start where you couldn't get him out for the first 3 weeks. And it feels like the Dodgers just feel like they're, I don't know, like every day we live and die with what's wrong with the Dodgers? They just lost 5 or 6. Oh, the Dodgers stormed into New York and beat the Yankees in a series. Right. They're going to win the World Series.
They'll be there in the playoffs, and that's all.
They get more date in. Obviously, the first year of Ohtani, it starts with this crazy scandal. Now he's gone back to just being a dominant baseball player and not really telling us much off the field, which is his choice.
Sure.
What's wrong with Freddie Freeman? Well, Freddie Freeman's been fine the last couple of weeks. His first couple of months were down. It just feels like this is the traveling circus of Major League Baseball. I feel like the coverage they get dwarfs every other team.
Yeah.
And probably with just reason, with the star power here and everything. I guess I understand it, but still.
Yeah, the takeaway for me is I think Biggio will play a lot of third while Muncy is out. I feel like Biggio could supplant Chris Taylor when Muncy comes back. Taylor is older, is right-handed, and has not been good at all. And so I think that could be the long-term spot you're looking at for Biggio, which is not super interesting from a fantasy perspective, but might be valuable for the Dodgers in real-life baseball. Biggio was pretty good in the second half last year when he shifted his approach, stopped trying to lift the ball. So he hit 272 in 53 games in the second half last year. So perhaps the Dodgers see a guy who they can just turn into a solid batting average, contact hitter who can play around the field. And again, that's not exciting for fantasy, but it's exciting, or it could be exciting enough from the Dodgers roster construction. I think the Dodgers, when they do this with prospects, like for a time, the Yankees prospects were like the prospects that were really, really well regarded, but never seemed to pop in the major leagues, and they would trade them away and nothing happened. There was no I'm trying to think if there was a Yankees catcher that everybody was like the next big thing. And I think he was like traded along with Justice Sheffield or for Justice Sheffield, or he was traded to the Mariners. It'll come to me, but there's been a lot of Yankee prospects, in the 2000s that never panned out. And, this was the whole like free Michael Busch. And then Michael Busch got freed, and he's been fine for the Cubs, but there's a lot of swing and miss there. The power is legit, but is it a profile of an everyday starter? Now we want to free Miguel Vargas, and maybe the same situation will happen with Miguel Vargas, where they're going to ship him off somewhere, and he'll be fine and not great. When Keibert Ruiz was coming up, it was like, well, if they didn't have Will Smith, Keibert Ruiz would be the starter because he's a great prospect. Now he's traded to Washington, he's going to take off, and he's been fine, but not great. And so maybe Miguel Vargas just isn't necessarily the player that we thought or we've been building him up to be over the last couple of years. And if he was, the Dodgers would be looking for ways to get him into the lineup.
I know the Yankees made a trade with the Twins where they traded a catcher. Is that the trade you're thinking of? The catcher you're thinking of? It's killing me. I can't think of this name. Yeah, it's funny with Biggio. The Dodgers kind of have a type that Biggio and Enrique Hernandez and Chris Taylor, they all kind of have the same skill set. You're never thrilled to play them, but they're startable, and you hit them 7th, 8th, 9th. They're adequate without being great defenders. So Dave Roberts loves his little Legos and his flexibility and stuff like that. I don't mean to minimize the talent of the players. They're all major leaguers and everything, but there's just not going to be a big fantasy takeaway here. The big takeaway, like Monday, we struggled to figure out if Locklear's mom was Heather Locklear. We came up with a probably no. And now our search is trying to figure out who that Yankees catcher prospect was.
I know who it is. It was Jesus Montero, who they traded to the Mariners for Pineda, and he never panned out at all. And then you look at like some of the other like big Yankee prospects. I mean, Estevan Florial was supposed to be really good. Blake Rutherford, James Kaprelian. A lot of these guys were, injury related, but like Justice Sheffield, Kaprelian, Kanan Smith and Jigba, Jesus Montero. Like these were guys who were, going to be good prospects for the Yankees when they gave up, when the Pirates got Roansy Contreras from the Yankees. It was like, oh man, Roansy Contreras is going to be very good. And it hasn't quite been, and maybe we'll get to that situation with the Dodgers.
Yeah, they're a long way from the days they used to give away people like Fred McGriff, and he'd end up being great. Steinbrenner famously had no use for his prospects. He just wanted guys he'd heard of.
Right, get rid of them. Other prospect news is Connor Norby got sent down when Jorge Mateo was brought off the concussion IL. Connor Norby wasn't great in 4 games, but he only got 4 games. We saw this earlier with Heston Kjerstad when he was brought up and didn't play. We're kind of seeing this right now with Kyle Stowers, who's brought up and not really playing. So my question to you is, are the Orioles kind of reaching like Rockies level frustration of they're going to call up these players and not play them? And granted, the situation is different because the Rockies aren't good and they should be playing those guys. And the Orioles are good and they're just calling up players without a real spot for them to be in. But every time the Orioles call up a prospect, we get incredibly excited. And then if you're including Cade Povich in there, who was in his debut and may not have the longest runway with Dean Kramer coming back, that could be 4 separate prospects who the Orioles have called up who we've been excited about in the same season who wind up getting sent down or just glued to the bench.
The problem is the lineup is so deep. 7 of their 8 regular players have OPS pluses of 115 or better.
Is it because you couldn't play Connor Norby over Ramon Urias or Jorge Mateo?
Maybe, but I mean, Hernandez, O'Hearn, Rutschman, Westberg, Mountcastle, Santander, and Kauser have all earned the right to play every day. I can't think of any other team that has 7 guys with OPS pluses of 115 or better who have all played essentially the full season.
Yeah.
So where do these guys slot in?
Jorge Mateo to me is a bench player
for sure.
He is a speed first player who can move around the field, who, is a 1 WAR player right now. There's nothing really exceptional about him. I'm disappointed that Norby didn't get more of a shot. I think I'm done on Orioles prospects this year unless a trade or an injury frees up significant playing time. Because I just don't think they're inclined to move these boring veterans who are good for them in real life baseball, where we look at like Ramon Urias, Jorge Mateo, etc., and think, why? Cedric Mullins, like maybe Mullins and Hayes both run out of playing time, and we do get Stowers and Cowser. They could be Stowser. It could be their like Bash Brothers name. But we get both of those guys in the outfield at the same time. But until we really see that avenue open up, like I can't keep bidding on these guys. I can't keep stashing them. I just, maybe Norby gets moved for a pitcher. I don't know, but I don't have any confidence they're going to play regularly this year.
I still think Baltimore's the best team in this division. This is the closest of the 6 divisional races. The Yankees are 2.5 games up on Baltimore. And then the next closest divisional race is Cleveland, which is a 5.5 game lead over the Royals. I feel like we've talked very little about the Royals. And I did not think, I thought the Royals, they're cute. Maybe they'll win 78 games. Maybe the Royals are pretty good, but I don't know what the odds are. The Yankees are such a public team. And again, I go back and listen to everything I said about the Yankees in March was pretty much wrong, but and I'm not saying this just to double down on a bad take, but I still think Baltimore's the best team in the division. And if they were at reasonable odds, I would punch them to win the AL East.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think they're both pretty solid teams, but I like the Orioles lineup top to bottom a little better. Obviously, like Judge and Soto, it's hard to compare. But I think the Orioles are maybe a little deeper. Speaking of AL East, huge move for the Red Sox. Maybe not huge, but they did get Masataka Yoshida off the IL. Garrett Cooper was designated for assignment in a corresponding move. My question to you is just like, I think we know that Masataka Yoshida is not going to be a huge power threat, but has the hate on him gone a little too far? Like he is going to be in the middle of the order for the Red Sox, DHing pretty much every day. He should be a high batting average hitter. He was last year until the end of the season, where he admitted to playing through a broken jaw and just wearing down on the long MLB season. But if you need batting average and, counting stats, runs, RBIs in the middle of a lineup, isn't Yoshida still a valuable player?
Oh, I think so. I mean, in his major league career, he's played 165 games. So although most people this side of Marcus Semien don't play full schedules, at least it neatly cleans up what he probably is. 286, 339, 436 slash. That's a 110 OPS plus, 10% better than league average with 17 home runs, 83 RBIs, 83 runs scored. 8 stolen bases. They were all last year. He hasn't attempted a stolen base this year, but he shouldn't be a 0 in that category. Right. That's just a decent, in most medium-sized leagues, that's like, your last utility spot, or if he qualifies in the outfield, he probably doesn't, but or in a field position, a decent professional offensive player. He's very rosterable, and it just makes the Red Sox lineup longer. We know it's a great place for left-handed hitters. It's a great place for offensive production. So yeah, I think Yoshida is probably an underappreciated asset right now.
I agree. Another player who was underappreciated for a while was Geraldo Perdomo, the shortstop for the Diamondbacks, who made the All-Star team last year. Did wind up only hitting 246 on the season, but he did have 16 stolen bases. He had only played in 7 games this year before going on the IL. He was activated off the IL and immediately slotted into the starting shortstop role. So given the fact that he stole 16 bases last year, and given the fact that he appears to be the starting shortstop for the Diamondbacks again, right now only really has to beat out Kevin Newman for shortstop reps. And I guess a little bit Blaze Alexander, but they've been moving him around. Are you interested in Perdomo at all in any league types?
He has the type of profile where you would think he should hit better than a 223 career average. He walks a lot. He puts the ball in play. He can obviously run. I don't know. He doesn't hit the ball that hard. That's part of the problem. But I'm surprised that he hasn't hit for a higher average, because he needs to really, his only skill right now is the stolen bases. He's going to bat 9th probably in an Arizona lineup that's at best average right now. So unless we can see him become bankable in batting average, I think I just leave him on the wire.
Yeah, I agree. I think in deeper formats, if you really needed steals, you could go for him, but you also should have picked up David Hamilton weeks ago if you were in a deeper league and needed a middle infielder with steals. I will say for his career, even though he doesn't hit for good power against right-handed pitching, against left-handed pitching. He hits for better average and contact against left-handed pitching. He started his first game against a lefty. So we do just need to see kind of how this shakes out as they go righty-lefty as the year goes on. It makes sense for him to continue starting versus righties as well, because the other two options that they have, Blaze Alexander and Kevin Newman, are both right-handed hitters, and Perdomo is a switch hitter. So it would seem logical that he would get the at-bats against righties, but it is something we need to just keep an eye on. Other news and notes, just to go over very quickly. Edwin Diaz is going to be officially activated on Thursday from the IL for the Mets. The Astros called up catcher Cesar Salazar. At this point, Yainer Diaz has not been put on the IL, but he has missed the last 2 games. And obviously calling up another catcher indicates at least some concern for Diaz. But again, that's a situation we need to keep an eye on to see if they're going to put him on the IL or they just figured they would use an extra catcher for a couple of days. Javier Baez was placed on the IL. I don't think that you had Javier Baez in any leagues, but in case you did, he's on the IL. Ryan Kreider was called up in a corresponding move if you are in like an AL only league and just want to look at a guy who might be playing more. It could be Kreider, though that could open up more at bats for somebody like Zach McKinstry, who the Tigers can move all over the field. That's kind of my first indication, is I think McKinstry could be the primary shortstop for the Tigers. So again, like, I am an AL tout. McKinstry is a free agent. That might interest me, but that's kind of the only leagues where we're doing that. And the Cubs placed Ben Brown on the IL with a neck injury. We kind of expected that they might finagle his innings a little bit. They had Jordan Wicks come back, who they put in the bullpen, but Wicks could move into the rotation. But just, take Ben Brown off your streaming radar for now, and we'll get a little bit more of a sense of his timeline. And then the last news, which I'm curious your opinion on, the Blue Jays have said that they are going to bring back Yariel Rodriguez this weekend. They haven't yet decided if it's Saturday or Sunday. He apparently is going to take the Alek Manoah spot in the rotation. However, he really made his name in the international scene when he was moved into a multi-inning relief role. He has not thrown more than 4 innings in any of his 4 starts at the MLB level. If he is a traditional starter, meaning like they don't use an opener and then bring him in afterwards, if he's a traditional starter, I don't think I have much interest in fantasy if this is a guy that isn't going to go 5 innings.
Right. And he's had walk problems in those starts too. And it's not just the team pulling him out. I mean, he's gotten to like 68, 69, 83 pitches in some of those turns. So he'd probably be only lasting another inning anyway. If you're starting games and we can't project you for at least 5 innings to start with, it's, that's just not rosterable.
Yeah. Would love to see them use like Bowden Francis maybe for the first 2 innings and then use Yariel Rodriguez after, because then you're looking at like that sneaky Ryan Yarbrough season where he won like, I think, what was it, 16 games, and we've been trying to get that ever since.
By the way, they're never gonna change this. But talk about an antiquated rule, right? If you're a baseball starting pitcher, you have to go 5 innings or you can't get a win. But then it downshifts to you could literally throw one pitch and get
one out. You get one out at any point.
Get one out. You can even have a pickoff attempt and not throw a pitch and get a win. That's so silly.
Yes.
If you have a game, say, where you throw 4 quality innings, say you throw 4 scoreless or 4 innings, 1 run, and then there's a bullpen parade and nobody throws more than an inning or maybe 2, and you're the most effective pitcher, why shouldn't you get the win? That just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on that one. We're going to get to the heart of our show and talk about some home run issues. But before we do that, don't miss the ultimate tryouts for a chance to represent the United States at the Olympic and Paralympic Games from June 15th to the 30th. Noah Lyles, Simone Biles, Katie Ledecky, and more of America's best athletes compete for a spot on Team USA in Paris. Watch our country's brightest stars continue their quest for gold on Peacock and NBC. That starts on June 15th and runs 2 weeks until June 30th. So make sure you keep that locked and loaded.
Paris, not far away.
Not far away at all. So we're going to talk about why home runs aren't home running at this point in the season. Really just want to highlight our friend Jason Collette, who shared this information for us. It's something that he has been tracking. Basically, the I'm going to give you the specific stats in a second, but we're tracking closer to 2022, which was the lowest offensive run environment that we had seen in a long time. Even though the offense was up last year. And Jason's belief, which again, these are all theories right now until teams ever weigh in, is that all teams were given humidors before, but all the balls were kind of stored differently. And so he believes that the baseball is playing with how the balls are stored pregame in the humidors because the decline in home runs has been tracking at around 10 to 11% as a decline all season long. And so it really hasn't been impacted by weather or anything. And it's been a consistent thing all season. So just for some data, right? Through the same date, June 11th, in both last season and this season, last year we had 2,253 homers by this point in the season. This year we have 2,076 homers. We have fewer strikeouts at this point in the season than we had last season. So more balls have been put in play. However, last year we averaged 4.56 homers per contact. So 4.56 home runs per ball put in play. This year we're at 4.09% homers per contact, which is down 10%. Some interesting things that Jason found is that the average exit velocity on pulled fly balls this year and last year is the exact same. 95.4 mile per hour average exit velocity on pulled fly balls this year and last year. Pulled fly balls this year on average are traveling 2 feet shorter. On average, the average fly ball is tracking 2 feet shorter, and the average fly ball distance on a barrel, so on a barreled baseball, which fits the parameters of a barrel, launch angle and exit velocity, it's 3 feet shorter this year than last year. So just point blank by data is showing us that balls that leave the bat at the same exit velocities as last year are traveling shorter this year than they were last year. And we across the board have far fewer home runs per contact this year than we have last year. So it's not just cold weather. It might be a small factor of it as the months warm up, but it's not just cold weather. And we're seeing something that is something we need to start taking seriously for guys whose value is based on power, because 3 feet per average on average per losing that per fly ball doesn't seem like a lot, but it makes a huge impact when you're talking about the difference in home run counts.
Yeah, for sure. And again, hat tip to our friend Jason Collette for sharing all this data. Just one of my favorite people in the industry and a really smart guy who's always asking the right questions. And make sure you read his work. He works at a bunch of different places, and one of my favorite people in the industry. Also, remember this data, I think you mentioned this, but I'll mention if you hadn't, it's year over year mapping out to June 11th. So it's not, we're comparing apples to apples. You know, all the July, August, and September baseball hasn't been counted.
True.
Been played this year. Last year, it's only factoring the similar months of the schedule. Yeah. So it's apples to apples comparison. You can't say, well, okay, last year, what happened in July? It doesn't matter. Well, Jason will update that.
Good clarification. I misspoke on that one. Yeah,
no problem. But yeah, in this, I'm looking at the same data sheet that you are, and the big thing in red is that 10% decline on home run per contact. And as you mentioned, 2 or 3 feet of distance on a fly ball is a big difference. It doesn't sound like it, but it's the difference between a ball on a glove and a ball on the wall or a ball on the seats.
Right.
And so baseball, I wish baseball would be transparent about this. They never are. There's been years where there's been home run spikes, and I know it can be a lot of different things. Sometimes it's expansion. Sometimes it's the shifting of strike zones. And it's interesting, this all happens in the year where Angel Hernandez finally decides to retire. But we're at a point now. Now, granted, if they do put in livelier balls, the hitter's just gonna try to hit home runs with it. They're not going to try to hit singles and doubles and bunt and everything. They're going to be like, okay, great, now I can hit a home run or try to hit a home run, and nobody's ashamed to strike out now. It's so hard to hit these guys, especially these relievers that come in, just throw 98, 99 with your hair on fire for an inning and then go take a shower. It's such a different game now. I don't blame the hitters for trying to hit home runs because it's never been harder to hit than it is in today's game. But this is a real thing. We're too deep into the season to ignore this. This is in that 10% gap I don't know how we fix it. There's a lot of guys on this list we're going to talk about who are really frustrating, especially the first name you have listed, but it's a real thing. What Jason's uncovered is one of the most, I think, challenging and troubling trends that baseball's facing right now.
Yeah. The question I think we'll ask ourselves as we get to these hitters on the list is this potentially impacting this hitter? Can the hitter make the adjustments? If this is a season-long issue, can the hitter make the adjustments to still provide value, even if the home run value is not there? And do we think that the issues that this hitter is facing right now are really because of the ball, or is it something within the approach, or et cetera? The first name probably won't shock people. It's Austin Riley. And I will say, to put this list together, I looked at hitters who were above league average to this point in the season in pull rate, fly ball rate, and exit velocity, but whose homer to fly ball rate was well below average. So the idea is, like, these are guys who are pulling the ball more than most. These are guys who are lifting the ball in the air more than most. These are guys who are hitting the ball in the air harder than most. That should be leading to home runs. It is not leading to home runs. Is it because of whatever's happening with the baseball, or something else? Austin Riley right now in the season has just 3 home runs and is hitting .229 in 50 games. He has a 40% fly ball rate, a 38.6% pull rate, just 5.2% homer to fly ball rate. 5.7%. Just so you understand, 2021, he had a 22.8% homer to fly ball rate. 2022 was a 25.2% homer to fly ball rate. 2023 was a 23% homer to fly ball rate. This year it is 5.7%. Do you think this is just about whatever's happening with the baseball with Austin Riley, or do you think there's something bigger going on here?
I mean, when does a bad start become a bad season? I wish somebody had tapped me on the shoulder before the year and said, yeah, that Atlanta offense, that was so much fun. You can draft Marcell Ozuna. I want you to ignore everybody else on this team because they're going to get hurt, they're going to slump, or they're going to do both of those things. And in the case of Riley, and just to make it more frustrating for his fantasy managers, there's that like 2 or 3 week period where he was hurt and wasn't playing, but they refused to put him on the IL for some reason. So Atlanta plays a man down. Fantasy managers play a man down. Since May 1st, what's he have, like 7 or 8 RBIs? My friend Frank Schwab texted me today, and he said, I never thought I'd be benching Austin Riley for Jose Miranda, but here we are. I just can't do it anymore. He's going to have the breakout game on my bench. I can live with it. I'm concerned it's going to be a lost season for Riley. It's too deep. We're too deep in the season. I can make excuses for anybody for a couple of months. Once we're in the middle of June, I think you have to downshift to a more reality-based approach.
Yeah, I have some concerns about the way he's being pitched and how he's adjusting to it. We should note his max exit velocity is way down this year. His exit velocity on fly balls and in general fly balls is 88.9 miles an hour, which is slightly above average. That's 64th percentile. It's well below his career average of 91 and what he did last year, which is 91.7 miles an hour. When you look at how he's being pitched, he's being pitched inside far less. He's being pitched outside 7% of the time more than last year. At this point in the season, if you're being pitched outside 7% more, that's a huge amount of pitches. He's being pitched up in the zone 5% more than last year. So pitchers are going like up and away on him. So he's not able to really yank those fly balls, get his hands in and turn on those fly balls. And I think it's a concern because that's part of the reason why he's still hitting fly balls. His fly ball rate is actually up from last year, but the pull rate is down. And I don't think he's pulling as many fly balls as we're used to seeing. That's why that exit velocity is down. I think he's a hitter who needs to shift his approach to how he's being pitched, but I don't know that Austin Riley going opposite field is going to interest you because this is a guy who you wanted 35 plus home runs for, and, was a guy who I think he hit 281 last year, but I think a lot of that was because he was able to crush pull side fastballs. You could be looking at a guy who, even if he turns this around, is hitting 260 with diminished power. And that's kind of a bummer.
Man, he's looking kind of a bummer to be. Totally agree. I'm looking at Atlanta's Fangraphs page right now, and again, Azuna's had a monster year. You look at their team WAR leaders. Azuna's far and away the leader, and then Acuna's still second, and then Travis d'Arnaud and Orlando Arcia are third and fourth, and their WAR computations are mostly sparked by their defense. That's where the majority of their values come. In fact, Arcia has been a minus offensive player because his WOB is 277. His weighted RC plus is 77, so he's not even a league average player. I know we're going to talk about Ozzie Albies in a second. I mean, I'd like to know who the buy low is on this team, because I'd love to pound the table and say, yeah, get this guy. It's going to get better. And I don't know who that player is. I mean, maybe it's Matt Olson. If you have a solution in Atlanta, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. I think like the interesting thing when you look at Austin Riley too, is like, he's getting pitched in the zone more than before. His in-zone swing decisions, his out-of-zone swing decisions, they all rate really well. He's not chasing bad pitches. He's not getting pitches that he can drive, but they're strikes. So the only other option is him to just take called strikes and hope that somebody makes a mistake. I'm not super optimistic about it. I'm a little more optimistic about Ozzie Albies finding value, because to your point, like Ozzie Albies also came up on this list, 47.3% fly ball rate, 47.8% pull rate. So he is hitting the ball in the air and pulling it more than Austin Riley, but a 4.7% homer to fly ball rate and just an 86.6% exit velocity on fly balls. The reason why I'm more optimistic about Albies is I don't think he needs to be so pull fly ball centric to have fantasy success. He's a guy with good speed. Yes, it'd be great if I could get the 33 home runs that he gave me last year. But if I could get 20 home runs and 15 steals and just go back to getting a 280-ish batting average, he's hitting 260 now despite these struggles. So if I get 280, 2020 from him, 280, 2015 from him, like, yes, that's not what I got what I wanted when I drafted him, but that's still a valuable player.
Yeah, the irony is what you should have done is drafted their starting staff. If you avoided Strider, Sale's been really good. Ronaldo Lopez, still incredibly lucky, but that 1.85 ERA, and Max Fried pitching probably to what we projected him to do, even though his strikeout rate is suspiciously low. I'm with you. I guess if I had to have my arm twisted and buy one of these players proactively, Albies makes the most sense. But part of what you were getting into with Atlanta 3 months ago is, the buoyancy of this lineup. They're going to be a top 2, top 3 offense. And it's just dead spots in the Atlanta offense. Last year, it felt like 1 through 9. Michael Harris batted last a lot of last season. That's how good they were. And it's just crazy. Obviously the injury to Acuna just leaves a gigantic hole. There's no replacing that for fantasy managers. There's no replacing that for the Braves, even if they go out and make a trade. And I think they probably we've seen them do this before. Remember the year they won the title, they went out and got Eddie Rosario in the middle of the year. They made some other retooling moves and they kind of fixed their lineup. They have a smart organization. I think the version of Atlanta's line, and they're still in the playoffs, right? Were they 6 games over 500 right now because that pitching has been so good. They're going to improve this offense, but it's not. Once you lose an Acuna, and when you have the seasons that Olson and Riley are having, and really most of the offense, Michael Harris, I'm curious if you have a theory on him. It's just sad for me to see, because I enjoyed the Atlanta offense last year as much as any offense I can think of, like the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, I was on the buy them all. They're all going to rebound train 2-3 weeks ago. And the more I've looked into it, the more I think I think they'll be better than they are now, for sure. Like, I'll tell you, I would buy all of them if they're being sold at a massive discount. If somebody's just like, this is broken. Because I think you will get more value, but I don't know that you're getting anything close to what you draft.
That's the thing. Okay. If you're presented an offer, if it's an obvious yes, I'm fine to take it. You just too much upside of the back class and the resumes. But if you're offered something with these guys and you're not sure what to do, it's probably a no for me.
Yeah. Eugenio Suarez pops on this list as well. 41.6% fly ball rate, 48% pull rate, just a 7.5% homer to fly ball rate. You might say, maybe the move to Arizona wasn't great for him. His exit velocity on fly balls is just 86 miles an hour, which is down 4 miles an hour from last year. But he has hit home runs in poor parks before, like Seattle, poor parks for power. What I find interesting is, like, he kind of does this, right? So over his career, Suarez hits 236 in the first half of the season. He hits 256 in the second half of the season. His ISO in the first half of the season is 189. His ISO in the second half of the season is 222. His OPS in the first half of the season is 747. His ISO or his OPS in the second half of the season is 816. Like Eugenio Suarez has always kind of been a guy who warms up a little bit as the season goes on. If we just want to look at homer to fly ball rate, homer to fly ball rate in the first half of the year over his career, 16.4%. Homer to fly ball rate in the second half of the season over his career, 19.3%. Not jarring, like, oh my God, it's a huge difference, but it is, he seems like somebody who needs to take a little bit of time to warm up. In looking at his rolling graphs, like things are moving in the right direction. He's hitting the ball harder. His strike zone judgment is getting better. His, contact ability has been getting better, even though it's still slightly below average. I think you're going to get another second half of the season for Eugenio Suarez where you're going to get a low batting average, but I think you'll get a decent amount of home runs and you'll wind up being, relatively happy with it. Last year, he hit 11 home runs in the second half of the year. He's hit double-digit home runs in the second half of the year every year since 2017. Wouldn't surprise me if he puts up 12 to 15 home runs, from July on. And as long as you don't care about him hitting 230, that's a decent lineup to hit that many home runs in.
You like him more than I do. His potential value would be in two categories, would be in home runs, would be in RBIs. He's not going to run much. He's going to hurt you in average. And because he'll hit to the middle or bottom middle of a lineup, he's never going to be a good runs guy. I mean, he's going to be in the 60s and 70s in full seasons. This year, of course, he's projecting far lower. The Arizona lineup hasn't been great. And his age 32 seasons, it's obviously a ton of swing and missing him. And he's led the league in strikeouts 3 different seasons. So in one of my mixed leagues, I think it's a 13-team league, my manager and I were debating about Suarez. He didn't want to cut him, and I ended up cutting him to pick somebody up, and he got a little mad at me. And I said, well, at what point is he allowed to be lousy and we just move on? Right. Now, I know what's going to happen. If he has a hot week, my co-manager is going to want to pick him up again.
For sure.
We ran into that with Mitch Garver. We finally cut Mitch Garver, and then he had a 2-home run, 8 RBI week. And I'm like, man, we were so patient with him, and this comes out of nowhere. But so maybe you mentioned the second half stats, and that's one of those things that I would never trust in aggregate, but I do think it can be true individually. And his differences are significant enough that I'm at least going to be open-minded to that. Again, if he comes out of the All-Star break smoking hot, maybe he'll be one of my pickups, but I think he's best left on the wire for now. I need to see him make good on something. I need to see a movement in the right. And you said he's been a little bit better of late, and I'll give you that, but I'm going to need a little bit more before I give up some resources to reacquire Suarez.
Yeah, I think it is, his fit is needs dependent, right? If you are okay saying, hey, from let's call it July 1st, right? Hey, from July 1st on, I'm going to get a 230 hitter who's going to give me 12 to 15 homers, and chip in 40 to 50 RBIs in the middle of a lineup. Like, if that works for you, if that's what you need, if you need that, a little bit of that power boost in RBIs, great. Like, if you have batting, you could support a 230 batting average if you have good batting averages around. But that is not somebody where I'm like, man, you have to pick that up in your corner infield spot. If you don't need the power, he's not really going to give you much else other than some decent RBIs. But that RBI total, I think, will be approachable with other guys.
And I'm trying to move away from the good version of this is Pete Alonso, where no stolen bases, batting average, liability, and he's just okay in runs, but he's a great power hitter. I've tried to move towards more broad players who are 3, 4, 5 category players, but maybe not dominant in a category or two. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to be how I draft next year, where I don't want these guys where their best case scenario is 2 categories or 3 categories.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. The next guy on this list is somebody that I know you're a fan of. We've talked about him a lot on this podcast. It's Spencer Steer. 45.8% fly ball rate, 42.5% pull rate, just an 8.5% homer to fly ball rate. But his exit velocity on fly balls is actually up 1.5 miles from last year. However, Spencer Steer, and he has 7 home runs, but he's hitting just 239. The homer to fly ball rate is down from last year. Last year it was up at over 13.9%. Are you kind of buying into there could be more power in the second half for Spencer Steer here? I mean, 7 isn't a bad number by any stretch of the imagination, but if you saw 23 last year, you were maybe hoping for like 25 or more this year.
Yeah, when I look under the hood with him, so many things look stable. He's not chasing more. His hard hit numbers are the same. His pull percentage is about even. Yeah, the fly ball rate is a little bit up, but it's not radically different. Obviously, some of that home run to fly ball gap is just baseball has that right now. So a little bit of that is to be baked in with what the league average is. But Spencer Steer is somebody I would buy with confidence. And I still like the lineup. And I realize there'll be a lot of moving parts when they get Marte back. Where does he play? There's so many different guys who qualify at different positions who can be moved all around the diamond. We know it's also one of the 3 or 4 best, the destination ballparks in fantasy baseball. Cincinnati's certainly one of those. So I'm holding on Spencer Steer, and I'd be happy to acquire him in a trade.
I fully agree with you. I think also like being jerked around a little bit. You're going to start in the outfield this year, practice outfield. That's where you're going to be. Actually, we need you to play the infield. You're going to play some third. You're going to play some first. Like I think maybe if Marte comes back and Candelario goes to first and it's like, hey, you're back in the outfield and this is where you are every day, except when you're DHing, that could also level that out a little bit. And so I'm buying in on Steer. I also have been saying that I'm buying in on Vinnie Pasquantino, who shows up on this list. He also has 7 home runs on the year. However, we're looking at a 43.5% fly ball rate, a 45.6% pull rate, just 8.2% homer to fly ball rate for Pasquantino. His average exit velocity on fly balls is up from last year. Obviously, last year was injury impacted. But in his last full season, which was, I guess, actually he only played 11 more games in 2022, but he is a career 11.8% homer fly ball rate ratio guy. He's down below that this year. The batting average is down more than we had seen in the past. He's pulling the ball more this year, not really increasing his fly ball rate. So I don't know that he's impacted as much by this. But his name did pop on the list, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on Pasquantino, because I still kind of believe in him as a little bit as a buy guy, in the sense that I think that batting average is going to tick back up into the 260-ish range. And he'll end the year with 15 to 20 home runs, and I'm okay with that in that lineup, which is surprisingly good.
Yeah, this is the first name we've come up with where I was strongly. I don't think you're going to get Steer remarkably under market, but Vinnie Pasquantino, you might get significantly under market, and all the secondary stats look really good with him. And granted, maybe some of these expected stats on Baseball Savant we have to take with a grain of salt. If the ball isn't reacting the way it should, then these expected averages and slugging percentages maybe should be a tick lower. But even with that, he's 38 points unlucky in batting average. He's about 70 points unlucky in slugging percentage. He controls his at-bats. He's always going to put the ball in play a lot. He's got a decent walk rate. He doesn't chase. I mean, he's got so many things you like as a hitter. And the Royals, this is another lineup that's like maybe 5 or 6 deep. It's not 9 deep, but the top of the lineup's really good. I mean, he's hitting behind Bobby Witt. He's hitting in front of Salvador Perez. It's a good place to be. Garcia's had a nice season in the leadoff spot. I think the top of this lineup is pretty good. Vinnie Pasquantino is one of those guys I think I would try to buy low. And a lot of times buy low advice, it's obvious. For buy low and sell high advice to work, there has to be reasonable people in your league who think you're wrong. And there's probably somebody who rosters Pasquantino right now who's like, I'm sick of this guy. He's a 239 hitter who doesn't run, who occasionally hits a home run. How is that helping me?
Right.
I would love to go out and get him. I think he's a great trade target.
I agree with you on that. I'm going to lump these last guys in and just curious if you have interest in any of the following names who qualified here. Again, as a reminder, these are hitters who are pulling the ball more than league average, are hitting the ball in the air more than league average, are hitting the ball harder more than league average, but are hitting significantly fewer homers per fly ball than league average. It's Nolan Arenado, Davis Schneider, Brenton Doyle, Gavin Sheets, Orlando Arcia, another Brave again, and Ian Happ. Are you interested in do you believe in the value of any of those particular guys?
I mean, Doyle runs and plays in Colorado. Happ's been such a consistent pro. I know the strikeout rate is bumped up and he hasn't hit the ball as hard this year, but I see no reason why he can't be the Ian Happ that he was the last couple of years, where he hits around 250 with maybe 20 home runs in a full season, decent run production. Happ is somebody I'd go after, and Doyle, because of Colorado, would be interesting to me. I don't know what to make of Arenado. It's been a bad season for St. Louis. Arenado and Goldschmidt are guys on a Hall of Fame trajectory. It's no fun to watch them struggle. I don't think I could pull the trigger on Arenado. Maybe Gavin Sheets. I'm kind of warming up to the Chicago lineup, which I never thought I'd say. They're still the worst team in baseball, and maybe some of these guys are going to get traded. Gavin Sheets is somebody, even though he's still in his 20s. Wouldn't Gavin Sheets be? We might have said this on Monday. I think he'd be a great target for the Braves.
Yeah, I mean, also he could probably play better first base right now than Anthony Rizzo, but I know that
the Yankees for sure. The Yankees are going to do something, right? Yeah.
The Yankees aren't willing to move on that. I agree with you on Doyle, also because I don't really care if he gets the power back, because the speed is also there. Davis Schneider has taken a little bit of a turn. He is getting he's getting a little bit more aggressive, which could be good, but the power is diminishing in addition to that aggressiveness, or in conjunction with it, and the swing decisions are getting worse out of the zone. I have always been an Ian Happ fan, so I am certainly willing to buy in on him wherever I can if people are really down on him, because I do think that that Ian Happ is a pretty solid player who is going to give you just maybe not a huge batting average, but solid production in most of the categories in the middle of what I still believe could be a strong lineup, and I believe a lineup that will be looking to add at the deadline to improve the lineup overall. But I don't think that's going to impact like Happ's playing time in particular.
Poor Davis Schneider. I mean, it feels like Toronto. Are they ever just going to give him a chance to play every day? I realize Spencer Horwitz has played well, but you think, Cavan Biggio is finally traded. Maybe Davis Schneider has clear path to playing time. No, he's still basically stuck in the platoon right now.
Well, I will say Schneider has, yes, he's trending in the right direction, but that's still just like 4 games a week, 5 games a week, as opposed to 7 games a week. And I think that's, the decision to constantly want to play like Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, the middle infield. They seem to not want to play Davis Schneider in the infield at all.
They love IKF. He's in the lineup every day. They love that guy.
No. And they seem to not want to play Schneider in the infield, which hurts because they are going to keep Kiermaier and Varsho in the outfield because of the defense they give them. And right now Springer's not losing playing time. So that's harming Schneider right now. And I think I was hoping for a little bit of a breakout from him that I don't think we're going to get.
Springer is 34. He looks like he's 40. Do you think they get a little off topic, but I just have a little fun with it? Do you think they're going to trade Vlad this summer?
I don't think they're going to go full. They don't strike me as a team that's going to go full rebuild like that, get rid of Vlad and start over. I do think they need to move on to some younger players around Vlad and Biggio. But I can't see them. I would vote no. I don't think it's going to happen.
You meant Bichette, of course. And
they're definitely going to trade Biggio. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, Biggio's going to get traded. I can just see it.
I sense it. I sense it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's just the Swamis have spoken to me.
Yeah.
What do you tell the Bo Bichette manager?
I tell the Bo Bichette manager what I would have told the Bo Bichette manager at the start of the year, which is that I think the batting average is going to be there, and he's a really solid contact hitter who will probably steal more bases than he did last year. But I don't think that his approach is going to lead to significant power. And I think you're looking at a 15 to 20 home run hitter because of how much he swings at pitches that are not pitches he could drive out of the park. But I think that 240 batting average is coming way up. I still think he's like a 280, 290 type of hitter, and he may not end there, but I think that's his like rest of season type of batting average.
He's got 4 home runs. It's just so hard to look at that.
But
he scored 22 runs. It's hard to play 64 games.
You saw it trending down
the lineup and score 22 runs. It's really difficult.
You saw it trending down over the last few years. I think the runs will improve as the lineup gets a little better as well, but I don't think the power is meaningfully coming back.
If we were just imagine we're in like the Friends and Family League or by the way, which you've been comfortably in first for several weeks now, and we're drafting in like a deeper mixed league. Is Bo Bichette like a double-digit round pick? He's like a 13th round, 14th round pick right now. Where does he fit to you?
I think he still goes a little higher because I really do think like if you pencil him in for a 280, 290 batting average, I think that gives him more value. Like if rest of the season he's 280 with 10 home runs and 5, 6, 7 steals in a decent lineup, like I think that gives him enough value to where shortstop's kind of like picked over a little bit. Where I don't think he goes in the top rounds now, but I think that like, you know, like maybe you're taking him in like the Jeremy Pena range.
I'm trying to see like guys who would be similar. Like Miguel Garcia qualifies at third base and shortstop. I'd rather have him than Bichette the rest of the year. I'd rather have Bryson Stott, 18 stolen bases, 5 home runs. I mean,
I'd probably rather have. It's weird to say I'd probably rather have Stott, but I think I'd rather have Stott because the better lineup steals. Yeah.
I'd rather have. Let me ask you this: Francisco Lindor or Bichette the rest of the way? It'd have to be Lindor. Yeah, too much category juice. Ezekiel Tovar.
I understand what the stats tell me. I would probably go Biggio. I really just don't trust Tovar's plate approach, and so I think it's going to plummet at some point in time. He swings outside of the zone so much.
You might laugh at me, but this guy's. And I'll close this little corridor and we can go back to the script. He's available in 62% of Yahoo leagues right now. He's hitting over 300 with 3 homers and 8 steals, and he has some pedigree. Been recently moved to the top of the lineup. Mason Wynn or Bo Bichette.
That's such a good call because Mason Wynn's driving category is going to be his batting average, and he's going to steal about as much as Bo Bichette is going to steal the rest of the year, if not more. Oh my God,
now that he's hitting leadoff, man, give me Mason.
Well, but I think he hits leadoff mainly against lefties.
Well, he's hit first. He's hit first. Oh, he's hit first his last 5 games.
Oh, they make that official move. I know that he was mainly starting against lefties, and Brendan Donovan was still leading off against righties.
I don't know if they've run up against a bunch of lefties in a row. I'll try to check that really quick.
No, I'm looking right now. Yeah, he started the last 5 games. And yeah, 2 of them were against lefties, 3 were against righties. So they have officially moved Mason Wynn to the leadoff spot. Wow, I might be taking Mason Wynn over Bo Bichette.
And again, available in about 62% of
because I think if we assume they're both going to hit for solid batting average, I trust Wynn's speed better, and maybe now the run total if he's going to hit at the top of the lineup. That's okay.
Mason Wynn for the win.
Yeah. We're going to do some quick hitters at the end to wrap this up with some streamer picks for you this week. But before we do that, Pinehurst number 2 hosts the best golfers on the planet for this year's U.S. Open. Find out if Scotty Scheffler or Rory McIlroy can break through this year after top 3 finishes in 2023. It's the 124th U.S. Open, Thursday through Sunday on NBC, USA, and streaming on Peacock.
And I'll give you a pick. If you have to make a pick to win the U.S. Open and Scotty Scheffler isn't available, I would kick Bryson DeChambeau. Has the distance to tame this course. We saw him come really close at the PGA, which Xander Schauffele won. I think the winner this week is going to be somebody who already has won a major. Of course, DeChambeau has one in his back pocket. And I think he's kind of gotten comfortable with his own skin. I mean, he jumps tours. He becomes kind of the bad guy. I think he's a more, more comfortable with his own skin. He's kind of made his peace with the fans and his reputation and everything. I think he's in a good place right now mentally. I expect a big performance from DeChambeau. He's not my favorite golfer, but if you had to make a pick and Scheffler's off the board, I think DeChambeau makes a lot of sense.
There's your pick. Speaking of picks, we're going to make you pick some streamers. This is just going to be picks from Scott and I. If you want like our reasoning or analysis, feel free to reach out on Twitter. I am at Samsky NYC. Scott is at Scott_Pianowski. You can ask us why we particularly like these guys. We just want to give you answers before we wrap up here. I have selected what I believe are the top streamers of the day based on Yahoo roster rates. If you think I missed somebody, I apologize. It wasn't intentional. So, Scott, how would you rank these 4 for Thursday? Casey Mize against the Nationals, Luis Severino against the Marlins, Lance Lynn against the Pirates, or Taj Bradley against the Cubs?
I know Bradley has no floor, but I think his strikeout upside is the highest of these 4 guys. Bradley's the name that jumps out at me.
Would you stream any of the other ones?
Lance Lynn has just killed me for like 2 years. I can't trust him. And I don't know who Casey Mize is going to be. I mean, he's the first overall pick. The Tigers had the first overall pick in some of the wrong drafts to have it, right? Where was the Adley Rutschman when they needed it? Well, they weren't picking first that year. But
yeah,
Washington's a pretty pedestrian lineup at the second half. We've talked a lot about the top half of the Washington lineup is fantasy fun, but it's not a deep lineup. Man, they had made on the ropes all last night, and they really couldn't put it over the top, although they did win the game in extra innings. I could Severino, I guess, if you're in a head-to-head where it's like you're not worried about the ratios, you're just trying to collect counting stats and strikeouts, and maybe even some hybrid leagues where innings matter. I guess Mize and Severino I could live with. I just can't trust Lance Lynn.
Yeah, I don't buy what Severino's selling long term, but I would stream him against the Marlins. But Bradley would be my pick as well. And I guess I would put Lynn above Mize because Mize has not been looking good recently. But I would prefer not to start either one of them.
It's just weird to see Mize not pitch like a power pitcher, right? He's that
well,
big trunk.
The fastball velocity and the vertical movement on it has really decreased over the last few starts, and I just wonder if that's like, he didn't pitch it all last year. Like, it's just a little bit of wearing down. It's a little bit of the changes aren't sticking over the long term.
I mean, he's built like Roger Clemens, but he's never going to, obviously, not a hot take here. He's never going to be Roger Clemens. Man, you're 6'3", 212. Just blow guys away. I don't know.
Yeah. Friday, you got DJ Hers against Miami, Andrew Heaney against Seattle, Mitch Spence against the Twins, Matt Waldron against the Mets, and Simeon Woods Richardson against Oakland. How would you rank those streamers?
Yeah, Waldron and Heaney jump out to me. I know Heaney hasn't been great this year, but Seattle, as Chris Crawford well knows, I mean, nobody's just afraid to pitch against those guys, the big strikeout team. And Waldron's just been so consistent. We talked about the knuckleball. It's a fickle pitch. The moment that goes south, you have to bail on Waldron, but he's not even a streamer to me anymore. I would play him every start until it goes in the wrong direction.
Yeah, Waldron is still below that 50% mark on Yahoo. He's my top option here. I actually would put Simeon Woods Richardson second against Oakland. That Oakland offense has kind of taken a step backwards. Woods Richardson's fastball velocity has actually been increasing, and he was touching 97 in his last start, which I don't think is, he's not going to throw 97, but I do think that, like, is the tide that lifts the boats a little bit, where like it raises his floor a little. Heaney third for me. I like the strikeout upside of DJ Hers, so he is fourth, even though the command is a little bit of a mess. But again, it's the Marlins, so I'll roll the dice. And then Mitch Spence, who I like, but I put him fifth against what is a decent Twins lineup. Saturday, you've got Tommy Henry against the White Sox. We think we're getting Max Meyer against the Nationals, so we will just put him here. Joey Estes against the Twins, or Keaton Wynn against the Angels.
Yeah, Meyer for sure if he gets to start. What people see with Keaton Wynn, I don't see it. I mean, his ERA is almost 7, and he's got a lousy strikeout rate and just kind of an ordinary walk rate. He needs to pitch well for a couple of times before I'll even consider him as a starter.
So that's interesting. I have Keaton Wynn second on this list, and I think that might have something to do with the list, right? Yes, Tommy Henry gets the White Sox, but I don't necessarily really trust Tommy Henry, and so I don't know that I really want to start him. Joey Estes has been good, and so I understand if people would rather choose Estes over Keaton Wynn. But again, I'm not targeting the Minnesota lineup in the way that, like, we might have when they were dealing with injuries, especially with Correa and with Royce Lewis back in the lineup right now. Keaton Wynn is somebody where I believe in. I mean, I think the splitter is a pretty good pitch. I think that might be all that he has. The slider's fine too, but I think the splitter is a pretty good pitch. I think the Angels lineup is pretty bad. And so
I get that, but his last 4 starts, and I realized he was on the IL in the middle of this, but he's allowed 24 runs. He's got 12 strikeouts against 7 walks. He hasn't gotten past the 5th inning in any start. I wouldn't. He's not in any way, even in deep leagues where you're just looking for any kind of volume. I don't trust him at all.
I do think some of it before the IL was impacted by injury, and then obviously his first start off the IL.
But then he comes back and allows 7 runs. How can you trust him?
Well, I never pitch pitchers in their first start off the IL,
for sure,
unless it's like my ace. But that's
Cole,
just me. Last day, Sunday, we've got Mitchell Parker against Miami. We've got JP Sears against the Twins. We've got Chris Paddock against Oakland, and we've got Spencer Arrighetti against the Tigers. How are you ranking those streamers?
Yeah, Chris Paddock was great his last turn. He's a week winner for you, and at Oakland is about as safe a spot with all that extra acreage. the game is a rumor. I don't know if you've ever been to a game in Oakland. You are so far from the field, man. It's really kind of depressing. And you also mentioned in the rundown that Thorpe and Waldrop are also going. I was so encouraged by Thorpe's first start at Arizona. Doesn't phase me. So Paddock's my first guy. JP Sears is really effective. He'll probably pitch well and not win the game because Oakland won't score any runs for him.
Yeah.
But I like Paddock. He's a proactive pick. Parker's obviously been pretty reliable. He wasn't great last night, but he's a pitcher who I like. And if you have to go a little bit deeper, I'm fine with Thorpe too.
Yeah, and Arrighetti has actually been much better of late. His last 4 starts have been pretty good. And so Arrighetti against the Tigers is something that intrigues me a little bit. I actually really like this whole kind of lineup of streamers. Mitchell Parker's been good. He gets the Marlins. JP Sears has the worst matchup of those 4, but he is going to get a Twins lineup that is super platoon heavy. So it's not going to have Kepler or Larnach or Kirilloff, which means it's going to have Manuel Margot and Kyle Farmer in it. And I'm not really scared of that. We think Hurston Waldrop is getting the Rays. I like that matchup because I don't really believe in the Rays offense. Thorpe gets Arizona. I don't think there's a real hope for wins here. So I guess I would say Paddock is my first choice against Oakland. I think maybe Waldrop is my second choice against the Rays. I don't really like the Rays offense, and I think his chance for a win there could be interesting. Mitchell Parker might be my third choice against the Marlins because I think the Marlins offense is bad, and I think he's pretty good, but he's not going to, or ratios are good. He's not going to get you a win. I might go Arrighetti over Thorpe because I think the Astros have a better chance to get him a win against the Tigers than the White Sox do against the Diamondbacks. But I kind of think all of these guys have a lot of like arguments for them. And if you needed a streamer in a head-to-head matchup or something to close out the week, like there's some stuff here on Sunday.
Right. Yeah. Sunday's deep enough that I might just skip, other than maybe Meyer, I might just skip over the Saturday guys and then look towards Sunday. And again, a lot of times in head-to-head, Sunday, it's all about massaging those categories and whether it's pulling back from pitching or leaning into it. Maybe your ratios are already blown out of the water, so you just go for the wins and the strikeouts. And I'm so glad you mentioned Tampa Bay's offense. They're 4th from the bottom in runs per game. The only teams that are scoring less per game are Miami, Oakland, and then far the worst has been the White Sox. So a lot of those teams we knew would be bad. Colorado is always a bad offense on the road. That's to be expected. St. Louis has had a bad season. Seattle's a great place to pitch, all that stuff. I mean, Tampa Bay's offense, I think the market has been a little bit slow to adjust to the idea that Tampa Bay, bad matchup. No. Tampa Bay, good matchup.
Yeah. Sometimes it just takes us a little while. So that's
kind of like this podcast.
It did. Well, we always go a little long. We're both a little.
That's on me. That's on me. I'm wordy.
We hopefully the people find the information useful.
For sure.
And if you do, you can rate and review this podcast. Let us know the things that you enjoy, or maybe put some nicely worded suggestions for us. But please rate and review. It does help us get the podcast out there. As always, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Samsky NYC, and Scott is at Scott_Pianowski. And we'll see you next week on Monday for another episode of the Rotoworld Baseball Show.